I bought an abandoned house at auction for just $100. Everyone said it was a money pit while tearing out a wall. During renovations, I discovered a hidden room no one knew existed. Inside were stacks of cash, more than $3 million, and a sealed envelope covered in dust. My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a single word. The moment I read it, I realized the money wasn't the real secret. The word was, sorry, not run, not mine. Sorry. I'm 38, single mom. I scraped together that $100 skipping lunches for 2 months. The house on Elm Court had been sitting empty since 2017 when the owner, Walt Briggs, died with no family left to claim it. I figured I'd flip it, pay off my car, maybe breathe for once. Third week in, I'm pulling drywall in the back bedroom and my crowbar goes through into nothing. Not insulation, air, a whole room behind the wall, maybe 6 by 8. Concrete floor, no windows, and stacked against the far wall, 12 black duffel bags. I didn't open them that night. I just stood there with my flashlight, shaking. The envelope was taped above. The bags, plain white, no name on it. Nobody's name. Inside, one index card. One word in shaky old handwriting. Sorry. That's when I noticed the photographs pinned to the back wall. Dozens of them. Houses, families, people I didn't recognize. Under each one, a name and an address. My stomach dropped. Walt Briggs hadn't hidden this money. He'd been trying to return it. Let me tell you who I was before I found that room. My name is Carla Medina. I grew up in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, second of 3 daughters. My father worked at a chemical plant for 31 years. My mother cleaned houses 5 days a week and made a rose cone poo on Sundays that I have spent the rest of my life trying to replicate and failing. We were not poor. We were not comfortable. We were exactly in that band of American working class life where you have enough to not be desperate and not enough to stop worrying. The kind of pressure that doesn't look like hardship from the outside, but sits in the walls of your childhood home like a low hum you never fully stop hearing. I was good in school, practical. My father always said, using the word the way other fathers use the word blessing. I studied business at Reuters Newark because it seemed like the right move for a girl who needed a real career. I met Danny Medina in my junior year, funny and loud, a laugh at Cadilla Parking Garage. We got married when I was 26. Mia came 14 months later. For about 4 years, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Danny was not a bad man. He was a man who couldn't grow up fast enough to keep pace with the life we'd built. He left when Mia was 2, drove away in a Chevy Silverado with his guitar in the back and a note on the kitchen counter that said he was sorry and that he loved us and that he hoped I'd understand someday. I haven't understood it yet. He sends birthday cards. He called on Christmas for 3 years and then stopped. He pays child support most of the time. Mia asks about him with the careful casualness of a child who has learned to keep her expectations low. She's 9 now. She's the reason I did not fall completely apart when the life I had planned dissolved around me. After Danny left, I did what I always do when things fall apart. I made a plan. The plan was to get stable, get a good enough job, save money, get out of the apartment in Trenton we were renting for $1,400 a month, which required financial acrobatics every month and left zero margin for anything going wrong. Things kept going wrong. The restaurant where I was waitressing cut my shifts. I picked up weekend work at a catering company, which meant Mia spent Saturdays with my Sister, ranatata, which meant ranata, was keeping a mental ledger. My car needed a new alternator. In February, Mia needed new shoes in March. In April, I put groceries on a credit card for the first time in my life, and then sat in the ShopRite parking lot and cried for 11 minutes before driving home. That was the floor. That parking lot in April. I need you to know that, because what happened next didn't happen to someone with options. It happened to someone who had used up all her options and was trying to figure out what came next. What came next was the internet at 2 o'clock in the morning. YouTube videos about tax, lean investing. I knew it was a ridiculous hobby for a woman with $412 in checking and a maxed visa, but it felt like something I could do with my brain that didn't cost money. I spent 10 months researching before I bid on a single thing. I learned the difference between a structural problem and a cosmetic one. I learned how to read a title search. I learned what liens mattered. I learned what assets, whereas no warranties expressed or implied, actually meant you're buying whatever is there, known and unknown, and you have no recourse if it's terrible. That clause had scared me for months. Then I decided it was clarifying. You know exactly what you're getting into. Nobody is pretending. The house on Elm Court in Millfield came up in a county auction I'd set an alert for. 3-bedroom colonial. Built in 1958, last assessed at $84,000. Back taxes owed $97. Minimum bid $100. Walt Briggs had owned it since 1991. Paid taxes every year until 2016, then stopped. Died in 2017. No spouse, no children, no estate. Filed road court. The county had been sitting on it for 2 years. I drove out to look at it on a Tuesday in October. Mia was in school. I told myself I was just going to look. The maple trees on Elmore were turning that orange that makes everything look like it's burning gently in a good way. The house sat at the end of a quiet block. The gutters were hanging. The front porch railing had given up and leaned against the house like a tired person. One upstairs window had a crack, running corner to corner with a line of dark mildew along its edges. I walked every room with a flashlight and a notepad. The kitchen was stripped in one corner where someone had started a renovation and stopped. The bathroom floor was soft in one corner. The basement had some old water intrusion along the north wall, but the joists were solid. The bones were good. I sat in my car in front of that house for 45 minutes after the walkthrough, running numbers, materials for the repairs. I could identify maybe $8,000 if I was careful. Potential sale price somewhere between $110 and $125. A thin margin, not a safe investment. The only play I had. I bid the $100. I was the only bidder. The county clerk who processed my paperwork looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "You know what you're getting into, right?" I said, "Yes." She made a face that suggested she had her doubts. She stamped the deed transfer. I owned a house. The first week I did nothing but clean. That sounds small. It wasn't. Walt Briggs had been a keeper. There are hoarders, people who've lost the ability to decide what matters. And there are keepers who know exactly what matters, everything, because everything might be useful someday, because hard times taught your grandparents that, and they taught you. The basement held 4 broken lawnmowers, 7 paint cans, sealed shut with dry drips, a set of encyclopedias from 1978, 3 extension ladders, and a chest freezer I was very glad to find empty. I filled a rented dumpster in 4 days, swept, scrubbed, opened every window that would open, Mia. Held on Saturday. She wore her rain, boots and a bandana over her nose and dragged bags to the dumpster with extraordinary seriousness. By noon, she had decided the house was going to be amazing. By 2, she had picked out which room she wanted if we moved in. I hadn't told her we were moving in, but when I did the math on what it would cost to pay rent in Trenton and fund the renovation simultaneously, the math made the decision. We moved in with an air mattress, a folding table, Mia's bed and dresser, and 2 boxes of kitchen things. Mia named the house Gerald. She just walked in the first morning and said, "Good morning, Gerald," to the walls. It stuck. The renovation went the way renovations go. Fix one thing, find 2 more things behind it. The soft bathroom floor revealed a rotted subfloor that revealed a slow leak in the supply line that had been dripping into the joist space for years. The kitchen corner, where the previous renovation had stalled, turned out to have hit a load-bearing wall that whoever started the job had known how to handle. It took me 2 days to work out the right solution and 1 day to execute it, and I was proud of that in a way that felt disproportionate until I realized it wasn't. Solving a structural problem in a house you own with your own hands after you've taught yourself how. That's not a small thing. It looks like a small thing and is a big one. Mia adapted with the flexibility of a 9-year-old who has already lived in 3 apartments and learned that home is less about walls and more about what happens inside them. She did homework at the folding table. She made friends with a girl down the block named Destiny within 2 weeks. And sometimes I'd look out the window and see them in the yard, doing something elaborate with chalk and a jump rope, and feel something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a long time. I was 3 weeks into the work when I got to the back bedroom. The ceiling damage was cosmetic. The drywall had stained and buckled, but the leak had been fixed before Walt died, and the structure underneath was clean. I pulled the damaged section, replaced it, taped, and mud, and turned to the walls. The back bedroom had 1 exterior wall, 1 wall shared with the hallway, and 1 long interior wall running toward the back of the house. I started on the interior wall. I always knock before I cut. You press your knuckles against a wall surface and listen. Old houses are full of decisions made by people no longer around to explain themselves. Left side of the wall, solid, dense studs at 16 inches, exactly right. Middle section roughly 4 feet wide, different, not hollow, not thin, a density that felt deliberate, an evenness that didn't belong. I told myself it was insulation, loose fill packed in by some previous owner. I told myself that for 3 days, while I worked on other things, on the 4th day, I ran a stud finder across the middle section. The readings jumped, not in any pattern you'd get from insulation, but dense, even, consistent, and then running it very slowly along the left edge of the middle section, a gap, a vertical gap, floor to ceiling, exactly the width of a door frame. I went out to my car and sat for a while. Part of me knew, part of me had known since the first knock. There is a quality to deliberate concealment that is different from the randomness of old housework. Some part of my brain had registered it immediately and filed it under. Not ready yet. I went back. Inside, I found the seam by feel as much as sight, running my fingertips along the wall surface until I felt the hairline crack that had been mudded and painted over, but not perfectly. Maybe 6 feet tall, 2 feet wide. A door someone had sealed into the wall. I picked up my rebar. The room behind the wall was small, 6 feet by 8. The floor was concrete, poured clean and swept. The walls were unfinished stud and sheathing. Along the right wall, a simple wooden shelf at eye level. Above my head, a single bare bulb on a wire disappearing into a conduit connected to the house's electrical. Someone had done this deliberately, carefully. Whoever built this room had wanted it to function. Cedar. Someone had lined 2 walls in cedar sheathing and something faintly metallic like the inside of a coin jar. Then I saw the bags. 12 black duffel bags stacked against the far wall in 4 rows of 3 military-grade canvas with metal zippers stacked neatly precisely, all handles facing the same direction. I unzipped the one on top. I had seen banded bills before at a bank, once at a casino, but never like this. Rubber. Banded stacks organized by denomination, filling the bag to the top. I zipped it back up. My hands were shaking enough that I missed the zipper pull on the first try. I stood in the doorway and did not move for a long time. The photographs were pinned to the far wall, above the bags in rows, so neat they had to have been arranged with care. I counted them later. 43. Some were printed on photo paper, some on a home printer. Some were older bordered prints, the kind you used to get back from the pharmacy in an envelope. Houses, mostly shot from the street the way you'd photograph a property you were considering buying. A bungalow with a screened porch, a ranch house with a carport, a duplex with vinyl siding, peeling away to reveal clapboard. Underneath, a colonial with a flagpole. In the front yard, a fewer of people. Candid shots taken from a distance. A man standing next to a pickup truck hand, shading his eyes against the sun. A woman in a yard with a garden hose, turned halfway toward the camera. 2 teenagers in a driveway shooting hoops, one of them laughing with his head thrown back. Under each photograph, written directly on the wall in pencil, a name and an address. The handwriting was old, shaky in the way hands get. Shaky after a certain age or after a certain amount of sustained tension. The letters were careful. You could see the effort, but the execution wavered. Walt Briggs had written those names and addresses himself. I knew that before I had any proof. The envelope was on the shelf, plain white, sealed with clear tape that had gone yellow and slightly brittle with age. I opened it. Inside was a single index card, 1 word in that same careful, wavering handwriting. Sorry. I sat on the concrete floor of that room and looked at 43 photographs of strangers. My gut put it together before my brain admitted what it was seeing. Walt Briggs had not been hiding this money. He had been saving it up to give it back. The photographs were not trophies. They were a ledger, a list of people he owed. I didn't know what he'd done yet. Didn't know how the money had been taken or how long ago. But the apology on that card was real. You could feel it in the handwriting. Old and unsteady. The pen pressing hard in some letters, like he was trying to make it permanent. He hadn't been able to fix it while he was alive. So he'd left everything he had in a wall and hoped somebody would find it and figure out the rest. That somebody turned out to be me. I lay on my air mattress until midnight. Then I got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and started making a list. 3 columns. What I know, what I don't know, what I need to find out. What I know is short. Riggs owned this house 26 years, died in 2017, with no surviving family, built a hidden room and filled it with cash. Pinned 43 photographs to the wall with names and addresses. Left a 1-word apology. What I don't know is long. Where the money came from, what he had done to the People in those photographs, whether the money was legally mine, legally his, or belonged to someone else entirely, whether anyone else knew this room existed. What I need to find out started with Walt Briggs, the Millfield Public Library opened at 9 o'clock. I was there at 9:02. The reference librarian, Douglas, helped me access the county newspaper archive without asking why I wanted to. Research a deceased local resident. I spent 4 hours at the terminal. The Millfield Courier had run since 1947. Walter James Briggs appeared in it 23 times between 1978 and 2016. The first mention a 1978 business section item. W.J. Briggs Contracting had been awarded a contract to renovate the Fellowship Hall at First Methodist Church, $340. After that, W.J. Briggs Contracting appeared regularly through the 80s and 90s. Church renovations, municipal contracts, a school gymnasium floor, a fire station, additions, steady work, the kind of contracting business that keeps a man employed for 30 years if he's reliable and not too greedy. In 1994, a longer item, not about a contract, a lawsuit. A couple named Leonard and Patricia Holloway had filed a civil complaint alleging that Briggs had accepted payment for a full kitchen renovation, completed approximately 40% of the work, and stopped showing up seeking the return of $11,000, resolved out of court. In 1997, another lawsuit, a retired postal worker named George Tuttle, $8,000 taken for a bathroom remodel that was never begun, resolved out of court. In 2001, third, a woman named Claire Sampson, who alleged Briggs had completed a partial renovation of her mother's house, billed for work not performed, accepted $14,000, then walked off the job, resolved out of court. By 2003, no more mentions of W.J. Briggs Contracting. What appeared in the 2000s small community calendar items, Walter Briggs. At a town council meeting, Walter Briggs. On a petition about road resurfacing, Walter Briggs on the volunteer roster at First Methodist Food Pantry, a man retreating into ordinary life. His obituary ran in April 2017. Walter James Briggs, 83, of Elm Court, passed away peacefully at home. Born and raised in Millfield, served in the Army 1953 to 1955, operated W.J. Briggs Contracting for many years, longtime volunteer at First Methodist, preceded in death by his wife Margaret and his son Thomas.
No.
Immediate family survived him. He had a wife, a son, both gone before him. I printed the obituary and the lawsuit items, folded them into my jacket pocket, and went to the courthouse. The county courthouse civil division held records going back decades. The clerk, Anita, was either very patient or very bored. I spent 2.5 hours with her going through the index. Walter James Briggs, doing business as W.J. Briggs Contracting, had been named as defendant in 31 civil complaints filed in this county between 1989 and 2003. 31. I wrote them all down. Every case number, every plaintiff name, every complaint, amount, every resolution date, most resolved out of court, 6 dismissed by the plaintiff without explanation. In my experience, that means the defendant paid privately. All the record. 3 went to judgment against Briggs, none of which appear to have been collected. The pattern was identical across all 31 cases. Briggs Contracting accepts a deposit. Work begins. Work proceeds for a time. Then it slows. Then it stops. Briggs becomes difficult to reach. Eventually unreachable. The client, who has paid thousands of dollars and has a house in various states of torn apart, hires a lawyer. The amounts ranged from $4,000 to $38,000. When I totaled them, all 31 cases using the complaint amounts, the number was $642,000. That was only the people who sued, the people whose cases made the public record. The photographs on the wall numbered 43. I drove home slowly. I made pasta for Mia with Jared sauce that was on sale. I sat across the folding table from her and listened to her tell me about Destiny and a chalk game, and nodded at all the right moments and didn't say a single word about what was in the wall behind us. The first person I told was Renata. I drove to her house in Linden on a Thursday evening after Mia was in bed and before Renata's husband Marco got home from his shift. I sat at Renata's kitchen table and told her everything: the auction, the house, the room, the bags, the photographs, the card. Renata is 5 years older than me and has been telling me what to do since approximately the day I was born, which I have resented and relied on in roughly equal measure. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual. When I finished, she was quiet. Then, how much? Money, I said. I didn't know the exact number yet. You need to count it. I said, I knew. And you need a lawyer. I said, I knew that too. She looked at me with the expression she reserves for moments when she thinks I've been catastrophically stupid and is deciding whether to say so. Then you're not going to run, are you? Not a question. I said, no. Good, because you didn't do anything wrong. The house is yours. You found it. Whatever it is, you didn't steal it. Pause. But Carla, count it. First, then figure out what it means. Then a lawyer before you do anything else. She was right, as she generally is. Counting took most of Saturday and part of Sunday. I unzipped each bag and laid the contents on the bedroom floor in organized rows by denomination. Counted each stack twice. Some of the bills were old, the kind with the smaller portrait that went out of common circulation in the late 90s. Some were newer, mostly hundreds and fifties, with stacks of 20s and some 10s. The total was $3,217,000. I wrote the number on a piece of paper, looked at it, put it in my jacket pocket, zipped the bags, closed the wall, sat on the floor of the empty back bedroom with my back against the sealed wall. The contracting fraud cases in the court record ran from 1989 to 2003, 14 years. But even if he'd taken $600,000 from the people who sued, that wasn't $3 million. Not even close. The people who didn't sue, who were too old, too tired, too ashamed, too broke to go to court, who couldn't afford a lawyer, who absorbed the loss and moved on because fighting never brought the money back. Anyway, 43 photographs on that wall, 31 civil complaints on record, and then however many had not made it onto the wall at all. I sat there a long time, thinking about the woman in the yard, with the garden hose, the man shading his eyes against the sun, the teenager, shooting hoops, people who had saved money and trusted a man who came, recommended and seemed solid, people who had handed over thousands for a new bathroom or a kitchen or a roof repair and gotten nothing back. This was not abstract. These were people who had been hurt specifically and concretely by a man who had spent 14 years treating their trust as a resource to extract from, and then that man had died and left the money in a wall and written one word on a card: sorry. I went to find a lawyer the next morning. Her name was Diane Patel, office in downtown Millfield, above a dry cleaner, general civil law, real estate and probate. Her website was straightforward. Her office was tidy. I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist said they were pretty booked. I said I had found $3 million in a wall and wasn't sure who it legally belonged to. Diane Patel came out of her office 12 seconds later. She was compact, mid-40s, reading glasses, pushed up on her head with the focused quality of someone who has heard a lot and is immediately aware when she's hearing something genuinely new. I told her everything. She listened without writing anything down. First question, she said when I finished. Do you believe the money was obtained through illegal activity? I told her about the civil complaints, the lawsuits, the newspaper, letters, contractor fraud, she said, which is theft essentially, though. Proving it as a criminal matter is complicated when the perpetrator is deceased. Right. And the photographs, you believe these are the people he defrauded? Some of them, possibly all of them. She made a note. The legal situation is genuinely complex. You purchased through a legitimate tax lien auction, so you have a strong presumptive claim to the property and its contents, but that presumption is rebuttable if the contents are proceeds of criminal activity, if there are identifiable victims with valid claims, or if the estate has standing to assert. What you need to decide is what you're trying to accomplish. If you want to keep as much as possible, the legal path is one thing. If you want to return the money to the people it came from, it's something else. I knew the answer before she finished the sentence. I want the people in those photographs to get their money back, I said. She looked at me for a moment. All of it, what they're owed, whatever they're owed. She made another note. That simplifies things considerably, she said in a tone that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. What we did over the next 3 days, Diane filed a formal report with the Millfield police documenting the discovery, establishing a time-stamped public record. She contacted the county prosecutor's office. She retained a forensic accountant named Glenn Ferris to analyze the court records and build a picture of the total amounts taken, and she wrote letters, one to each of the 31 plaintiffs in the civil cases if they were still alive and locatable. Certified mail. The letter said, essentially, we are investigating the business practices of the late Walter Briggs. If you had a dispute with W.J. Briggs contracting that was resolved without you being made fully whole, we would like to speak with you. She sent 29 letters. 2 plaintiffs had died. In the first 2 weeks, 17 people responded. The calls started coming in. On the day, I was retiling the bathroom when my phone rang. Unknown number. I climbed out of the tub and answered. It was a woman named Beverly Marchetti, 71 years old. She told me she'd been waiting 19 years for someone to call her about this. She had hired Walt Riggs in 2004 to renovate her kitchen, $9,000 as a down payment on an $18,000 contract. He had torn out the old kitchen, cabinets, countertops, flooring, and then stopped coming. She had called him. She had gone to his house. She had filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. She had considered a lawyer, but her husband had been sick that year, and she hadn't had the bandwidth. She had lived with a gutted kitchen for 4 months while her husband was undergoing chemotherapy. She cooked on a hot plate in the hallway, washed dishes in the bathroom sink. She never got her money back. Eventually paid another contractor $7,000 to finish the job, which he'd quoted at 11 because of how badly the tear down had been done. Total out-of-pocket loss, $16,000. She had the records. I don't know why you're calling me after all this time, she said, but I'm glad someone is. The stories came in, and they were all the same story with different details. A man named Russell Haynes, 63, who had hired Briggs to fix A leaking roof in 1999. Briggs had removed the old roofing material, said he needed to order supplies and never came back. Russell had spent 2 winters with a partially tarped roof, $6,000 gone. A woman named Connie Shamansky, 78, who had hired Briggs to build an addition to her mother's house in 2001. Her mother had been 92 and wanted more space for her things. Briggs had poured a foundation, framed 2 walls, and disappeared. The unfinished addition stood in the yard for 3 years before it was torn down. The mother died without seeing it finished. $32,000 paid. A retired firefighter named Arthur Akavor, 67, who had hired Briggs for a bathroom renovation. $12,000 taken. Bathroom demolished. Briggs never returned. Arthur and his wife shared one bathroom with 3 children for 8 months. A widow named Helena Park, 84, who had hired Briggs to fix her basement. After a flooding event, she had given him $8,000 in cash because her grandson told her never to pay contractors by check. She had no receipt. She had no recourse. She had spent years believing it was her own fault for being foolish. That last one, the woman who believed it was her own fault, broke something open in me that I had been keeping carefully sealed, because that is the specific injury this kind of fraud inflicts that doesn't show up in court records, not just the money, the corrosion of your confidence in your own judgment, the voice that says you should have known better. You were naive. You trusted the wrong person. That's on you. I had felt that voice, not about this, about Danny leaving, about business choices that hadn't worked out, about the decisions that had landed me in a studio apartment, eating cereal for dinner. That voice that says, you should have seen this coming. Helena Park was 84 years old and still carrying that voice about a man who had deliberately engineered her trust as a mechanism for theft. I should explain the legal structure that made everything possible. Diane's strategy was elegant. The money as presumed. Proceeds of fraud against identifiable victims couldn't simply be distributed by me without legal authorization, but the identifiable victims had valid civil claims against Walt Briggs's estate, and I, as legal owner of the property and its contents, could voluntarily submit to a process whereby those claims were adjudicated and paid. In practice, we put all the money into a court-up, supervised escrow account. Glenn Ferris, the forensic accountant, went through every case, every complaint, every letter, every record we could find, and calculated the out-of-pocket loss for each claimant, adjusted for inflation, and where appropriate for the additional costs the fraud had created, time lost, rental costs for alternative arrangements, the premium paid to second contractors to fix what Briggs had destroyed. 43 photographs on the wall. We found 41 of the people they represented. 2 had died without leaving estates that could receive payment. Of the 41, 38 were still living. 3 had died since the photograph was taken, but had left estates or family members who were legal heirs. We reached them all. The total verified loss across all 41 claims was $1.4 million. The remaining $1.8 million sat in escrow while Diane worked through the legal process. I drove to Helena Park's house on a Tuesday with a check. She lived in a ranch house with a bird bath in the front yard and a cat in the front window watching me walk up the path. Her daughter had called ahead, but she still looked at me when she opened the door with the slightly confused expression of someone who has been told something that doesn't compute. I was younger than she'd expected a woman. I was wearing work boots because I'd come from Gerald directly. I handed her the Check. $11,400. Her original $8,000 adjusted for. Inflation plus a calculated amount for. The aftermath. She looked at the check. For a long time. Then who did you say? You were? I explained again. The house. The room, the money. Walt Briggs's. Photograph of her house on the wall. She was quiet for a moment. The cat came and wound around her ankles. He felt bad about it. She said finally, I'm sorry. Walter Briggs, he came to my door. Must have been 2009, maybe 2010. Knocked on this porch. Said he was sorry for what he'd done. Said he'd been making it right with people. Said he hoped I'd forgive him. Pause. I told him sorry. Didn't pay for my basement. He said, no, ma'am, it doesn't. And he went away. She had not seen him again. I sat in my car outside Helena Park's house. For a long time after that, he had tried, personally, knocking on doors saying, sorry, it hadn't worked. You can't undeaf someone with an apology. Helena Park had been entirely correct, but he had tried. And then he had tried a different way. The room had been built. After 2009, the electrical work was updated, newer than the rest of the house. He had spent the last 7 or 8 years of his life filling it. I thought about what that looked like. An old man working alone, accumulating cash, counting it, organizing it, photographing the houses of the people he'd wronged, writing their names on a wall, knowing he was going to die before he could finish, leaving the key in a lock he hoped someone would find. Sorry was not enough. He had known it wasn't enough. The money was the rest of the sentence he didn't know how to write. The distribution took 6 months, 41 people, and 3 estates. The average check was $34,000. The smallest was $11,000. The largest was $61,000. Connie Shamansky, whose mother had never seen. Her edition finished, adjusted for 30 years of inflation. Every check went with a letter explaining where the money had come from factually without minimizing what Briggs had done. 36 people responded. Some were brief. Think. You. I never expected this. A man named Curtis Webb wrote a full page. He described what the loss had meant to his family, how he and his wife had argued about it for years, how she had blamed him for trusting the wrong man, how it had sat between them. He said the check didn't undo any of that, but it felt like the argument could finally be over. He thanked me personally and said he didn't know what kind of person goes to this trouble for strangers. Beverly Marchetti called. She cried. She told me about her husband who had died 3 years after the kitchen nightmare, and how she had told him on his deathbed that she didn't think they'd ever see that money back. She said she wished he were alive to see this. I cried too, which surprised me because I thought I had already processed all of this. You don't fully process things until they're over. That's the truth. The person who called after Beverly was a woman named Dana Wong, 66 years old, who had been 14 when Walriggs defrayed her parents out of $23,000, which had been their savings, for a new heating system. She had grown up in a house that was cold in the winter. She had watched her parents be embarrassed, be angry, be ashamed. She had watched her father not want to tell anyone what had happened because he believed people would think he had been foolish. My parents never recovered from it, she said. Not just the money, the feeling of having been taken advantage of. My father stopped trusting people after that. And I don't mean contractors, I mean people. She was quiet. I don't know if this changes that, but I wanted you to know that the money is the small part of it. I told her I understood. She said, I don't think you do. I mean that respectfully. to have grown up watching it happen to your parents and not being able to do anything. That's a different kind of knowing. She was right. I told her she was right. After I hung up, I sat at the folding table and thought about what it means to be a child watching your parents be hurt. I thought about Mia, what she would carry from these years of too tight money and air mattresses, and a mother who sometimes cried in the car. What she would know about the world from having lived through it at 9. I hoped she would learn that you can build a floor from scratch if you need to, that the bones matter more than the surface. Said houses and people both have hidden rooms. The legal determination on the remainder came through on a Wednesday afternoon in May. I was on Gerald's porch with a cup of coffee watching a cardinal investigate the forsythia that had bloomed along the back fence. Diane called, "It's done. 1.8 minus fees and accounting costs is yours legally. Clearly, uncontestably yours." I said, "Thank you." She said, "You know most clients in a situation like this would not have done what you did. The legal path you took, voluntarily submitting to a claims process, agreeing to escrow, cooperating with the forensic accounting. You didn't have to. You could have kept the whole thing." I said, "I knew. Why didn't you?" I thought about Helena Park, about Dana Fong's father, who stopped trusting people, about Beverly Marchett's hot plate in the hallway. Because it wasn't mine, I said. The house is mine. The room is mine. Finding it is mine, but the money had people attached to it. Diane was quiet for a moment. "You are," she said finally, "genuinely unusual. What I did with $1.80. $8 million after fees and taxes, which left approximately $1.1 million. I finished the renovation of Gerald properly. I hired a plumber to replace the old galvanized pipes, an electrician to upgrade the panel, had the roof done by a company I spent 2 weeks vetting, checking references, license, every review I could find. I was not going to be the kind of person who cut corners on someone else's work. I opened a savings account for Mia, not enormous. I didn't want money to be the thing that shaped her, but enough that college would not be the calculation it had been for me. I paid off Renata's student loans. She cried. She also immediately told me I shouldn't have, which is exactly what Renata does when she's grateful. And I started buying more properties. I did not sell Gerald. I had intended to fix it, flip it, move on. That was always the plan. And I did move on to other properties. A duplex needing serious work 20 minutes away. A small commercial space in a town that was changing. Another house that looked like nothing and turned out to be something. Within 18 months, I had 4 properties in various stages of work. Within 2 years, I had a small company, a real company, with a bookkeeper and a part-time project manager who was better at scheduling than I was. But I did not sell Gerald. I knew where the pipes ran. I knew why the kitchen floor made that one sound in the corner. I knew what the second bedroom looked like at 7 o'clock in the morning when the light came in at that specific angle. I had stripped it down and put it back together. That was a different kind of knowing than anything I could buy. The back bedroom is my office now. Bookshelves on the interior wall where the hidden room had been. A drafting table in the corner. A good length. There is nothing behind that wall now except the back of the bookshelves and the studs I put into. Replace the ones I'd opened up. The concrete floor is gone. I poured a new floor over it and laid wood on top. The bare bulb and the wire are gone. The shelf that held the envelope is gone. What isn't gone is the index card. I kept it in a kitchen drawer for a while and then moved it to the desk in the back bedroom and eventually framed it, which felt strange and then necessary and then right. It hangs above the drafting table, one word in shaky old handwriting. Sorry. I look at it sometimes when I'm working and I think about what it cost him to write it and what it would have cost him more to not write it. I think about the difference between a man who does harm and knows it and does it anyway, and the same man at the end of his life trying to make an accounting. I don't forgive him. That's not mine to give. It belongs to the people he hurt, but I understand him in the partial way you can understand someone you never met through the record they leave behind. He was a man who had done something wrong for a long time and then spent a long time trying to do something right. He ran out of time before the right thing was finished, so he left it for whoever came next. I came next. There are parts of this I'll be living for years. Phone calls I still think about. Dana Fong's voice. Beverly Marchett's husband dying with a gutted kitchen between them. Helena Park's cat winding around her ankles on a porch where a man had once knocked on the door and said sorry and walked away. There are also parts that are mine and not for this story. What it did to me to have money for the first time in years. What it did to Mia to watch her mother not flinch. What it did to me to stand in that hidden room and choose in the space of a few minutes what kind of person I was going to be. I chose to count the money. I chose to find the victims. I chose to sit in Diane Patel's office and say, I want the people in those photographs to get their money back. I chose to stay. A Walt Briggs chose to build a room and fill it and write one word on a card. It was not enough. It was also something. The difference between the person who does the harm and the person who does the repair is not always as clear as we want it to be. Sometimes they are the same person at different points in time. Sometimes the repair is left for someone else to finish. Sometimes that someone else is a 38-year-old single mom with $100 and a pie bar and more stubbornness than sense. Mia walked in the morning. I called Gerald Dunn, looked around at the clean walls and the finished floors and the light coming through the reglazed windows, and she said, Gerald looks happy.